Square Enix has come a long way with Final Fantasy since the first game on the NES back in 1987. A game that was reportedly made with the developers' backs to the wall, since Square at the time may have gone bankrupt had the game not performed well. Thankfully it did, and it's now a very popular and successful franchise and one of the heavy hitters when it comes to Japanese RPGs. However, we're going to be looking at the 16th entry in the series with Final Fantasy XVI. This game was developed by staff members who had worked on the MMORPG Final Fantasy XIV, as well as its relaunched and more successful iteration, Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn, including having the likes of Naoki Yoshida, known by his moniker Yoshi P, as Final Fantasy XVI's producer, and Masayoshi Soken as the game's composer. Now, just before we charge on ahead, there are going to be spoilers in this review, mainly regarding the player character in the first half of the game, but late game footage will be out of context. Final Fantasy XVI is set on the continent of Ash and Storm on the planet Valisthea. You play as Clive Rosfield, the firstborn son of Elwyn and Annabella, the Duke and Duchess of Rosaria, as well as the shield or protector for his younger brother Joshua. Joshua was born as the dominant, or the host for the Icon or summoned Phoenix, so the succession is passed over Clive in favour of Joshua. Both brothers are on good terms and are friends with Jill Warwick, a young girl whom both would care for like a sister. One day, Joshua and Clive accompany their father to Phoenix Gate, with Clive having a small adventure along the way. That night at Phoenix Gate, the forces of Rosaria are ambushed by soldiers from the neighbouring nation of Sanbreque. Elwyn is killed, which forces Joshua to emerge as the Phoenix. Shortly afterwards, a second Icon of Fire, Ifrit, appears and battles Phoenix, killing it. Clive manages to survive the onslaught but is captured by Sanbreque soldiers and becomes a Branded, a magic-using slave serving the Sanbreque kingdom as a soldier. Fast forward 13 years later, and Clive is now part of a unit tasked by Sanbreque to kill the Dominant of Shiva who had appeared fighting the Dominant of Titan. Clive and the remainder of the unit find the Dominant of Shiva and fight her, knocking her unconscious. Before he can deliver the final blow, Clive realises that the Dominant of Shiva is Jill and hesitates. This ultimately leads him to killing his commander. Clive and an unconscious Jill are then found and reunited with Clive's old wolf companion Torgal, and meet a man named Sid who takes them back to his hideout. From there, Clive joins Sid in his plight to create a world where bearers/branded, dominants and magic users can be equals, while trying to free as many bearers and branded from the non-magic users who have enslaved them. In the meantime, Clive seeks to find the Dominant of Ifrit so he can avenge Joshua's death. A pretty full-on story, but is the game any good? Find out in The Good. Let's address the elephant in the room here with the game's change in gameplay. Final Fantasy XVI is a more action RPG orientated game. While Clive is sent to set locations throughout the story, a lot of these set locations in the regions all come together to form a large map of the area which Clive can revisit during the game. As Clive explores these areas, he can find enemies exploring the field and can start fighting them off the bat. If he gets close enough for an enemy to spot him, then they can start the fight too. The battle system allows Clive to string together combos using a sword combined with magic. Depending on what icons Clive has, he can also use magic and skills from them too, with each icon having their own specialties and battle style. While you can only control Clive, you can issue orders to Torgal to attack an enemy, heal Clive, or launch an enemy, which can certainly help keep them busy, or set up combos for you. Larger enemies and bosses will generally have a stagger bar that drains as you continually deal damage to them. Once this bar has been depleted, the enemy is staggered and you can deal increasing amounts of damage to them during a brief window of time while the bar refills. The game does reward dodging, and successful dodges will allow Clive to counterattack, and there's even an icon whose skill rewards dodging attacks at the last second to charge up an attack. You can also parry an enemy if you're able to get a hit in just before they strike, slowing the action down for a brief moment so you can get some extra hits in. Items are assigned to shortcuts to be used in the midst of battle, though you can pause to use items if they aren't equipped to a shortcut or if you need a short breather. The game does have fights against the icons, which I think are my favourite battles in the game, and they get better than the last as they go on for the most part. They remind me of giant kaiju or monster fights, and the battles are on an epic scale. As Clive defeats enemies, he gains gil which he can use to buy supplies, weapons and materials, experience which will increase his stats when he levels up, and ability points which he can use to learn, improve or master skills. You can also find stones scattered throughout the land acting as challenges where Clive has to defeat waves of enemies before time runs out with only the abilities of a single icon. Story events can be replayed from the hideout, and there's even challenges where you complete previous story levels with restricted equipment and stats for a ranking to keep you busy. In the beginning, you do have the choice of a story-focused difficulty, which will give you accessories to strengthen Clive and make the gameplay side of things easier, or a gameplay-focused difficulty, which is the game's normal difficulty. Completing the game will unlock New Game Plus, in which Clive's levels, abilities, money and items carry across, while also unlocking Final Fantasy difficulty, which will result in stronger and more aggressive enemies, an increased level cap, and the ability to strengthen Clive's gear further. I think the gameplay is a welcome change to the series and works very well with its story structure, and I think the story structure of the game should affect how its gameplay and battle mechanics work, so while it suits the events that happen over the course of this game, I'm no way endorsing it to be the way the series has to go in future, unless it's the best way to express that game's story structure. I really do like it though. The story and lore of the game and its world is something I also really enjoyed. This game has opted to go with a more mature, dark fantasy approach, and it's pretty clear and obvious that there had been some inspiration taken from Game of Thrones, as well as European medieval elements in its presentation, and I think the shift in tone and setting is quite refreshing. The game does share some of the common elements of other Final Fantasy games, as well as making nods to them. Crystals are a key element of the story, as the mother crystals in the capitals of each nation are what allows magic to thrive. Crystals are harvested so that the people can use them for magic, but you also have bearers who can cast magic without them. These bearers are generally enslaved and branded, and put to use by those who can't use magic, and are often treated poorly. To make matters worse, if a bearer overuses magic, they're cursed to die slowly from petrification. Even dominants aren't safe from the negative effects of magic overuse, and as more magic is being used, the blight plaguing the land and causing life to wither away spreads, making places nearly impossible to live in. The game also has a large amount of side stories that Clive can complete throughout the course of the game, and while I initially wasn't big on them, by the middle of the game I considered them integral to the world building and lore. If you complete the side stories, characters will remember what you've done for them, and even some one-off side stories have had an emotional impact, just showing how people live their lives. As you progress through the game, you can also recount your tales to Hippocrates, who will keep records about people and the world, and can even provide some more information around it if you're wanting to know the lore around the game's world. You can also speak with Vivian Ninetails, a scholar who can help you keep track of the events of the game and how the characters all relate to one another at certain points in the story. I also felt the game's cinematics and visual beauty added to the impact of the game's world building. Even playing through the game with a focus on performance against visuals, I switched about halfway through the playthrough, the character models and environments look stunning, even more so during the icon battles. The story kept me engaged from start to finish, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. The game's music and voice direction I also think is superb. The game's lip syncing and motion capture was done with English voices in mind, and as someone who normally plays games with Japanese voices by default, it was a delight playing through the game with English voice acting.
Is that all she was to you? A plaything? Do you really not care that she's dead?
She's not dead. She's a rock.
That? The crystal's curse? That's just how she died. And now she's gone forever. Giving another bearer her name won't change that.
No, don't say that.
It's true. And without that brand, she would have been just another girl. Somebody's daughter. Just like you.
But Dad said bearers don't have parents.
They do. Parents that give them away. Families they'll never see again. But you became Chloe's family when you took her in. Remember that. And remember her.
The voice actors and actresses I think were perfectly cast, and voice direction was incredibly well done. I would go so far as consider it better than the Japanese voices, which I switched to for Final Fantasy mode in New Game Plus for comparison. The game's music really captures the setting and supports the tone of the story. Final Fantasy as a series has been very good in terms of its music, and this entry is certainly no exception. Personally, my favourite track in the game is To Sail Forbidden Seas, which is a boss theme. Surprise surprise, given that my favourite Final Fantasy music happens to be boss themes. Nonetheless, as much praise as I can give this game, it does have its faults, so let's look at what I didn't like in The Bad. I think there could have been a little more variety with the game's battle mechanics. Most monsters, and by extension even bosses, have a simple pattern. Dodge attacks, then wail on them. If it's a large monster or a boss, knock that stun bar down and spam all of your attacks while they're stunned for massive damage. The game also forgoes elemental weaknesses and resistances, which I think could have encouraged players to experiment more with different icon abilities. Just seems weird using fire against fire and having it do the same amount of damage as what ice, wind or thunder would have. Even acknowledging it by maybe doing more damage to the stun bar or some enemies tanking elements they're strong against, or even healing them would change things up, so you would need to strategize. One of the abilities that Clive learns as part of his base moveset is to charge up a magic attack to deal more damage. Final Fantasy generally has a basic, intermediate and advanced level of elemental spells with Fire, Fyra and Firaga as an example of this. While enemies and bosses can use advanced level spells, Clive cannot, with the charge spell only being at intermediate level. I think mastering all of an icon's abilities should allow Clive to cast the advanced level of the elemental spell to show mastery of it. Could have been a way to handle this. Another thing I've noticed is the lack of buffing and debuffing spells. While you have items that can temporarily increase your attack and defense, and accessories that can improve the damage or cooldown of skills, there's really nothing in place to cast status ailments on you or the enemy to keep you on your toes. Or well, in the enemy's case there is. The player-centric approach I think is also a double-edged sword as well. For most of the game you're controlling Clive, and only Clive. The other party members are all AI controlled and cannot die in battle, so you don't have to worry about them, instead focusing on keeping Clive alive and in the fight. Having simple support commands similar to how you can command Torgal to do things might have been a nice addition, though I fear it might bloat the control schemes, and admittedly, it was a little nice not having to worry about my party and healing them all the time. An approach I think to remedy this could have been to have small sections of the game where you get to play as another party member while Clive is doing something story related, like if the party needs to split up to explore an area, or a character temporarily leaves to do something else. The prologue has you play as Joshua briefly, so it's not outside the realms of possibility. Maybe playing as Sid, Jill or even Gav, one of the scouts at Sid's hideout with different movesets, might have broken things up a little. While the game was meant to be Clive's story and his relationships with the people around him, it would have been nice to play as some of the people around him to further expand on how Clive's actions are changing the world and what people think of him. This can go hand in hand with some of the side stories that Clive can complete throughout the game. I don't think there's anything else for me to complain about, so let's wrap things up with the opinion. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with Final Fantasy XVI. The game manages to retain its feel while changing things up by having an excellent narrative, setting and themes, supported by its world building and excellent voice acting, direction and music. The only issue was perhaps making the battle mechanics a little more complex, and perhaps have you play as other characters during the story, the latter which I think is pretty minor. The game kept me entertained, and whether you want to breeze through the game or take your time to complete everything, I think it's well worth it. If you enjoy action RPGs and, of course, Final Fantasy, then the game's definitely worth getting. As Final Fantasy games are mostly unconnected to one another, there are exceptions. It's not like you need to play the other 15 games to enjoy this one, though if you've played other entries, they all share common terminology and aspects, so you'll know the references when you see them. So with that, it's time for my rating. I would give Final Fantasy XVI Torgal out of 10. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next Infinite Backlog review. If you enjoyed today's review, feel free to check out some of our other videos and subscribe for more. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram and our Facebook page. Once again, thank you for watching.